Okay. Good afternoon to all guest speakers and participants. I hope everyone had a delightful break. Let me welcome you again to the mini conference 20 years after the reorganization of power in Indonesia, state and capital in an age of polycrisis. We now proceed with our third session, that is panel discussion. And chairing this session is Professor Robertus Robert from Universitas Negeri Jakarta. Um, uh, Professor Um, Let me introduce a little bit about Professor Robert, and feel free to introduce yourself again later if you wish. Um, Professor Robertus Robert is a sociologist and human rights activist in Indonesia. Sorry. He is a lecturer at the Faculty of Social Sciences at Universitas Negeri Jakarta and has been a visiting researcher at Melbourne University. He has published extensively on democracy, human rights, and political movements. Additionally, he has co-founded various civil society organizations and served in fact-finding teams investigating political violence and human rights violations in Indonesia. I would also like to welcome our panelists, Mbak Trisia, Mas Fahrido, and Mas Yowes, if you would like to join us at stage. And I also would like to welcome Mbak Diatika as our discussion for the panel discussion. And with that, we begin our third session, panel discussion. Professor Robert, the floor is yours.
Oke, selamat sore Bapak Ibu sekalian. Akhirnya kita memasuki pada sesi paling penting dari mini conference pada sore hari ini. Saya sengaja ngomong pakai bahasa Indonesia dulu supaya di Robinson nggak dengar. Walaupun dia pasti ngerti juga ya kan. Oke, we have three panelists today. The first one is Dr. Fakhrido Susilo from Kata Data Insight Center and also President University. Dr. Fakhrido Susilo hold a PhD in Policy and Governance from the Crawford School of Public Policy, ANU. And his research interest intersects the areas of governance, comparative democratization and decentralizations, and the political economy of public finance. Dr. Fakhrido had been a Fox International Fellow at Yale University, Macmillan Center for International and Area Studies from 2020 to 2023. He is currently the Executive Director of Kata Data Insight Center and an international affiliate researcher at the ANU Indonesia Institute. And the second panelist is Dr. Yes Kenawas from Atmajaya Catholic University of Indonesia. Dr. Kenawas is a political scientist with 15 years experience working on democracy, political parties, subnational politics, and decentralization in Southeast Asia. He has extensive experience in organizing political campaign, writing political analysis and policy brief, and providing political advice. And our third panelist is Dr. Trisia Wijaya from Ritsumeikan University. Dr. Wijaya is an incoming Mackenzie Research Fellow at the Asian Institute, University of Melbourne, and a Senior Research Fellow at Ritsumeikan University. She received her PhD in Politics from Murdoch University, Australia, and she has recently been selected as the 2023 Herb Fate Center Fellow from Monash University, Australia. Dr. Trisia has published widely leading academic journals and policy outlet on issues related to China-Indonesia relations, state capital relation, and geopolitical economy and green developmentalism. And uh, we have also discussed Dr. Diatika Yasih from University of Indonesia. Dr. Diatika is assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at University Indonesia and hold the position of Deputy Director for Academic Affairs at the Asia Research Center within the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences at the same university. Dr. Diatika research interests encompass the increasing precarity in work and life under neoliberal pressure and their contradictory effect on workers' subjective experience, solidarity, and politics. She is the author of Precarious Worker in the Gig Economy Neoliberalism, and it's this content in Indonesia. So, based on what we have here in the panel, yeah. So, as the introduction, I would like to briefly bridging the session by saying that one of the fundamental implications of oligarchy theory is that it affirms not merely the expansion or diffusion of economic and political power, but rather the economization of all political institutions. This system is both economically and politically exploitative in that respect. Consequently, it expands what was originally a purely class-based contradiction into a broader contradiction between the oligarch and wider entities, whether it's popular forces or citizen or civil society or whatever you like, based on our previous discussion. So simultaneously, by integrating politics as business or economic, the oligarch possesses direct political instruments that enable them to adapt more flexibly to other forces. In this session, we will examine how oligarchy intersects with other manifestation of power, oligarchy and political dynasty from Dr. Yoskenawes, hopefully, oligarchy and clientelism from Dr. Faragrido, and how oligarchy operates in each international encounter from Dr. Tricia. So to start our discussion, I would like to give my microphone to Dr. Faragrido.
Okay. Do we have the slide? Uh, all right. Good afternoon, colleagues. Um, greetings to all of us. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to stand here and speak in front of friends, mentors, gurus, and oligarchs of the field of Indonesian political studies. I will be speaking about uh, clientelist and oligarchic politics in Indonesia, and I'm choosing the title of my presentation, Post Jokowi in Past 100 Days, Continuity and Changes of Clientelist Oligarchic Politics in Indonesia, to provide a critical reflection and or mini evaluation, as crude and imperfect as it may be, on how the dynamics of clientelism and oligarchic politics have persisted and could possibly change following the presidential transition of Jokowi to Prabowo. I'm dividing my presentation into three parts. I will firstly it needs no reminder, but I will do it anyway. I will be reminding us on how the two powerful concepts of oligarchy and clientelism have shaped the study of Indonesian politics since Reformasi to date, and find a common thread between the two concepts to aid us in our analysis. Secondly, I will be highlighting how the dynamics of clientelism and oligarchic politics unfolded during Jokowi's era and whether such dynamics persisted under Prabowo. Jokowi's period, as I'm arguing here, is especially important because it serves as a critical juncture in the trajectory of the nation's democratic quality and, by extension, the future of oligarchic politics. And finally, I will provide a preliminary conclusion and throw several questions for us to ponder in order to take the discussion on the interplay of oligarchic politics a step further. So let me move to the. So we all know that much of the scholarship on Indonesian politics coming in the wake of reformasi and decentralization have agreed on the dual characteristics of Indonesian polity. On the one hand, Indonesian polity is described as clientelistic. Clientelism pervades the political system, and clientelism here is defined simply as the exchange of material benefit for political support, and it is usually regarded as the informal rules of the games in democracy or in politics in Indonesia. Meanwhile, de facto power in Indonesia is concentrated among materially endowed elites, which makes the system oligarchic by definition. The two concepts complement each other in the Indonesian context, as high-cost democracy requires vast material resources to compete in politics, favoring oligarchic actors or those with possession of or access to material wealth as means to succeed in political competition. As a result, we often see oligarchs endorsing politicians in political contestation or even directly nominating themselves. I now move to my argument as Jokowi's period as a critical juncture. And I'm arguing here in the fashion of path dependency framework that Jokowi's period serves as a critical juncture to the trajectory of oligarchic politics because the actions or inactions and policies taken by his regime have hurt democratic checks so bad that it allows succeeding regimes to do further damage to democratic quality and maximize the concentration of power, thereby entrenching oligarchic politics. This can be seen most evidently from three respects. So first, there's an utter disregard for norms and rules for a healthy democracy by openly endorsing and actively supporting certain presidential candidate, even mobilizing state apparatus and resources for partisan political gain. Secondly, there's a weakening of institutional checks to power by exerting greater control over anti-corruption agency and civil society. And lastly, um, there's been a series of pro-capital policies which gave much more economic power to big conglomerates and oligarchs. Jokowi is also notable for his employment of clientelist tactics extensively to gain political advantage, which can be seen at least from three respects. First, there was a massive provision of cash and food assistance programs ahead of the 2024 election. Uh, he's also been effectively using public offices as source of patronage to reward supporters and loyalists. I know that this has happened during SBY's term. SBY pretty much was the inventor of this tactic, but I think Jokowi perfected it in the sense that he provided patronage in the form of appointments of campaign supporters and his loyalists to various positions within ministries, SOEs, and various public bodies. And lastly, uh, this is less often mentioned in scholarly debates, but I would argue here that allowing non-career bureaucrats or external actors to occupy bureaucratic offices up to echelon 2 positions through the revision of the civil service law, which was passed in October, um, is also has also facilitated more clientelistic politics in the dynamics of the state. Uh, some may argue that the revision aims to bring the best talents outside of government on board, but I would say the reality is far from that. This provision facilitates political appointees to rope in their cliques and use bureaucratic positions as patronage for their loyalists. This is demoralizing and demotivating to professional career bureaucrats who expects a merit-based promotion or selection. Another hallmark of Jokowi's regime had been the extensive appointment of business politicians or politicians with prior top-level entrepreneurial positions or own a business themselves as cabinet ministers. And an excellent study done recently by Eve Warburton shows that the rise of business politicians is actually a general trend in Indonesia, but the number of such politicians holding cabinet positions under Jokowi had risen sharply, surpassing previous regimes. And this is once again a reminder on the primacy of capital and by extension of oligarchs in Indonesia's politics, especially during Jokowi's period. Does the dynamics of oligarchic politics under Jokowi extend to Prabowo's administration? From the outset, we can be confident that Prabowo's victory further affirms Warburton's thesis on the emergence and primacy of the business class in politics, as Prabowo himself, much like Jokowi, is a businessman and can even be regarded as an oligarch due to the scale of his wealth. But does Prabowo's regime represent an entrenchment of oligarchic politics? Beyond Prabowo's immediate status as an oligarch, we can see that there is a continuity or even deepening of clientelist oligarchic character under Prabowo's administration from at least 2 points. First, many appointed cabinet members are either oligarchs, Erick Thohir, Rosan, and so on and so forth, or have direct links to oligarch. Second, there is a marked increase of influence of oligarchs external to the state towards policy making and political decisions. Haji Isam here is a prime example whereby an oligarch wields direct influence over multiple ministerial appointments and state agenda. The picture there represents cabinet members with close links to or endorsed by Haji Isam. Another example would be Hashim, Prabowo's own brother, who is widely regarded as highly influential in shaping policy directions, even though he does not hold any formal structural executive positions. A telling example of the immense influence of Haji Isam can be seen in one of Prabowo's priority agendas, the food estate project, where the oligarch is known to have closely supported the projects through the provision of excavators and relevant infrastructure. Haji Isam owns a diversified business conglomerate with significant interest in the agribusiness sector, which is widely suspected to benefit from the project. Indeed, the value of the company share soared up, the value of the company share, which was in charge of um, agribusiness sector, soared up following the appointment of cabinet members linked to him. Having said all that, I think there are potential limitations of the effective wielding of clientelist oligarchic forces under Prabowo because of these three reasons. So first, the Prabowo's flagship program, which is the large-scale free lunch program, is designed rather as a universal policy rather than a particularistic policy. It means it targets all the beneficiaries, and no one can be excluded from that once it's been launched, which makes it harder to distribute along clientelist lines. So this is pretty much different from hibah and bansos, for example. Second, the severe budget cuts imposed by Ministry of Finance affect the availability of discretionary funds or hibah and bansos as other as it affects the availability of discretionary funds like hibah and bansos because these funds are allocated in the budget as belanja lainnya or other spending, which was cut up to 50% in the budget. Finally, in the longer run, greater favor afforded to certain oligarch actors might fuel inter-oligarchy competition or even conflict. We can see from the news that certain conglomerates like Agung Sedayu, for example, or MNC Group are already facing trouble or issues by the heavy-handed approach by the state. Can we move to the last slide? Did it disappear somehow? Okay. So to conclude, we have seen how Prabowo's regime represents a continuation, if not deepening, of clientelist oligarchy character, while also facing several limitations. The interplay of oligarchic politics in post-Jokowi Indonesia, though, would likely depend on these three factors. First, the relations between Jokowi and Prabowo. And I think it is important to ask here, how would a breakup between Prabowo and Jokowi look like? And how would it affect the oligarchs? Secondly, inter-oligarchy competition. And I think it's particularly relevant to ask here, how would an inter-oligarchy conflict manifest under Prabowo? How would it look like? And how would it shape the configuration of oligarchy in Indonesia? And lastly, Prabowo's mode of control. And a couple of questions to ask here is, would Prabowo become more centralistic and or autocratic, given that the path had been laid bare by Jokowi? And how would such mode of control affect the nature of oligarchy in Indonesia? That's my closing remark. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Fakhrido Susilo. And now I'm going to give time for Dr. Kenamas.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. So it's so good to see some familiar faces and new faces here at UI discussing oligarchy in a room named after one of the most prominent oligarchs in Indonesia. I think UI has successfully shown that oligarchs can be good too, can be benign or benevolent. Just kidding. And I'm privileged to be here today to commemorate and critically engage with the profound contributions of Richard Robinson and Fedi Hadi's seminal work, Reorganizing Power in Indonesia. So the oligarchy framework offered by Dick and Fedi in reorganizing power, as well as the oligarchy framework proposed by my Ustads Al Mukarram Jeffrey Winters, remains a crucial reference for understanding the persistence of oligarchic structure in the post-Suharto Indonesia. The oligarchy framework especially becomes even more relevant to understand the country's political environment in the past 5 to 6 years, where Indonesia's democracy, according to Sana and Eve, is at the brink of slipping into a competitive authoritarian regime. So while much of our discussion today has focused on the international and national levels, I will shift our attention to the subnational level, where the dynamics of oligarchy and dynastic politics present a compelling yet underexplored dimensions of power consolidation. In this presentation, I'm not trying to particularly make a causal argument, but I will try to present some reflections based on my study on subnational dynastic politics that hopefully can bring the ball of oligarchy study forward. Yeah. So we have discussed this the whole day. The oligarchy framework has proven highly effective in capturing the broader political economic realities in Indonesia. Suharto's regime collapsed, but the power structures that served as the keystone of the regime did not disintegrate. Instead, they adapted. As Dick pointed out this morning, not only in Indonesia, but also in the region, oligarchic forces managed to consolidate power, political control over states' institutions to protect their interests and ironically by leveraging the democratic formal institutions and methods. As argued by oligarchy scholars, the transition to electoral democracy has not dismantled oligarchy. Rather, it has provided a new set of rules through which oligarchs can operate and even hijack the neoliberal agenda. Most importantly, the oligarchic framework demonstrated to us that reform is not only simply a technocratic issue, as proposed by the neoliberal technocrats, but reform, in fact, is a power struggle. And looking at the situation in Indonesia today, it seems that oligarchies are winning the game of reform. Therefore, the oligarchy framework helps us to make sense of the controversial policies under different post-Suharto governments, such as the tax amnesty program, the policy to promote the low-cost green car or LCGC, both took place under SBY's administration, and most recently, the decisions to make PIK2, PIK2, a national strategic project, nickel downstreaming, food estate, and the infamous job creation omnibus law, all of which happened during the Jokowi administration. Next. However, what about the subnational level? The decentralization policies implemented in 1999 and the direct elections in 2004 were designed under a neoliberal logic of promoting good governance. Yes, yet as Dick and Fedi touched a little bit in reorganizing power, and also Fedi in localization of power, also argued that decentralization and democratization at the subnational level did not threaten local and to some extent national predatory interests. It merely changed their strategy on how to absorb material resources from the state. One such adaptation touched briefly in their subsequent works in the proliferations of uh, local political power after decentralization. And dynastic politics, I think, has become an integral mechanism through which local oligarchs maintain political control in their respective regions. At its core, dynastic politics is an attempt to monopolize power, ensuring the continuity of wealth extraction and rent seeking, mainly from state resources based on familial ties. It is a subnational reflections of the broader oligarchic phenomenon. Next. So the continuing growth of political dynasties at the subnational level supports the oligarchy thesis proposed by Dick, Fedi, and as well as Jeffrey. The formation of political dynasties, especially in the case of dynastic successions, is a response to another technocratic recipe to curb power monopolization, that is, the introduction of term limits. When an incumbent cannot run for the third time, it is rational for them to promote their family members to succeed them and keep the power within the family. Without any significant institutional obstacles to engage in dynastic politics, we are seeing steady increase in the number of dynastic politicians occupying subnational executive offices in the past 15 years. In the last wave of Pilkada alone, we are seeing 60% increase in the number of dynastic politicians who won the election, be it as the head or deputy head of subnational units, provinces, districts, and cities. Next. So Amalinda and I are working together to create a data set that records the presence of dynastic politics in the last Pilkada. Hopefully, we can publish the dataset soon so other scholars can benefit from it. Based on our current data, 611 dynastic candidates competed in the last wave of Pilkada and in 355 subnational units. 93 of these candidates had explicit business backgrounds, illustrating the overlap between economic and political power. But I believe the number is actually bigger than 93. The problem is the access to get the data is quite limited. The rest are former civil servants, political party cadres, members of DPR or DPRD, basically parts of the politico-business oligarchy. Very few activists competed in the last wave of subnational election, and even when they competed, like what happened in East Java, they lost the election. This indicates that the arena of electoral competition at the subnational level is increasingly favoring candidates with a certain background, such as the blue blood, those with significant material endowment, party cadres, and those with a civil service background. But however, surprisingly, only 246 dynastic candidates who managed to secure electoral victories, and in 213 subnational units that are currently under dynastic control. Not yet, but they're going to be inaugurated soon. So those 213 subnational units will be under dynastic control. So on the one hand, these numbers highlight the entrenched presence of dynastic rule in Indonesia's decentralized political system. But on the other hand, they also raise a critical question. If material inequality produces political inequality, and we assume that all dynastic politicians operate under the same institutional circumstances, and money politics is practiced by almost all candidates competing in local elections, the question is, why do some dynastic flourish while others fail? Next. So while the oligarchy framework helps us to understand why dynastic politics persist, it has limitations in explaining variations at the subnational level. As Pepinski argued in Beyond Oligarchy, oligarchy as a framework struggles to provide causal explanations for different political outcomes. To advance our understanding in the context of dynastic politics, I think we need to ask, for example, questions like, why do some political dynasties become hegemonic, widespread, and long-lasting, while others remain localized or disappear after a short period of time? Is dynastic success simply about a matter of wealth, or does it depend on how that wealth is deployed? How do networks of influence, both political and economic, shape dynastic resilience? And to what extent do local structural conditions influence the longevity of political dynasties? These questions indicate that while oligarchy remains a useful theoretical concept, it must be supplemented with a more nuanced comparative approach that account for local variations. I think I share the same concern with Tom Pepinski as he argued in Beyond Oligarchy. Another critical issue that oligarchy framework might struggle to answer is investigating the variations of impacts of dynastic control on local governance and development. I'm questioning, do dynastic rulers always engage in extractive rent behavior? Or is it possible for dynasties to govern effectively and contribute positively to their constituencies? In other words, do variation exist between benign and malicious dynasties, and under what conditions, if there's any, do they emerge? Some research suggests that while many dynasties engage in clientelistic politics, others may develop localized strategies for political survival, including providing public goods. However, these positive cases is exceptional rather than the norm. And in most instances, I believe dynastic rule reinforces local inequalities, limits political competition, and consolidates power in the hands of few families. But again, we need to provide empirical evidence to really understand when they do work as predicted and when they fail to meet the theoretical expectations. These questions, I think, if we stretch a bit, align with Dick's questions this morning. And I think in order to bring the ball forward, scholarly works should also focus on understanding the dynamics at the meso and micro level uh, with the objective to enrich the oligarchic analysis. Next. So the oligarchy framework continues to be relevant 20 years after the publication of Reorganizing Power in Indonesia. Indonesia remains dominated by oligarchic forces, both old and new, that have successfully adapted to the democratic system. However, as scholars, I think we need to refine and extend this framework to better capture the nuances of political competitions at the subnational level. Pepinski proposed that we complement the oligarchy framework by investigating causal mechanism, particularly those related to material wealth and political power through controlled comparative analysis. Indonesia, with its highly varied local political landscapes, provides a perfect laboratory for such an approach, be it with quantitative or qualitative approach or methods. By studying the effects of dynastic rule in different regions, we can develop a more comprehensive understanding of power consolidation beyond the existing oligarchy framework. After all, not all political and economic outcomes can be blamed on oligarchy, as many pundits and netizens commonly do these days. I believe Dick, Fedi, Jeffrey also never wanted their oligarchy theory to be the theory of everything, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But that's what I sense from reading your work. Therefore, building data sets to empirically test some hypotheses regarding oligarchy is necessary and should be a collective endeavor, scholarly endeavor. So to conclude, we need to continue interrogating the resilience and adaptability of oligarchic power, not only at the national, but also at the subnational, also in its subnational manifestations. The rise of political dynasties in Indonesia's local politics is a testament to how oligarchic interests can reconfigure themselves in response to external shocks. While we have made significant achievement in documenting and analyzing these dynamics, much work remains to be done in explaining their variations, their impacts, and their long-term consequences for Indonesian democracy. Thank you, and I look forward to discuss with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kenawas. Dr. Tishi, time is yours.
Test, test. Okay. Uh, can you hear me? Oh, no? Test, test. Is it clear enough? All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a challenging for everyone here. Please wake up. Yeah, I can't serve coffee here, but at least I can entertain you for the next 15 minutes to talk about infrastructure and nickel. under the oligarch framework. So my name is Trisha Wijaya, but unfortunately, I'm not Sinarmas Wijaya. Yeah, I'm different Wijaya, like because the resource is not fairly distributed among Wijaya clan. Yeah, so I'm just a middle class Wijaya and end up being intellectual labor here. All right, so that's just a background. Please go ahead. Okay, so today what I'm going to discuss here is I would like to recall oligarchy thesis, but also doing some sort of self-corrective on this oligarchy thesis. And I would like to invite everyone to visit another concept that actually quite complementary to oligarchy thesis, which is the authoritarian statisms by Polanczas and interior bourgeoisie that I will present in the next few minutes. And also, I would like to feel something about populisms that we already discussed earlier, and I will try to fit it into two key sectors which are popular in Jokowi era, but I think one of them is still popular today, which is hilirisasi, downstreaming, and infrastructure, and how it's related to the state and the class. And next, I will conclude my presentations. Next. 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 Okay, stop here. So I think I don't need to talk long to explain about it because that's the reasons why we are gathering here. But for those of you, especially the younger generation who are feeling curious with this kind of works, please ask your lecturer. I think Sofan is coming. I don't know, but Sofan told me that he's teaching economic politic international. So if you are so curious, getting curious with free school of thought, please ask Sofan to incorporate this book into his courses. I think we should stop talking, or please read beyond Acemoglu about inclusive institutions or the Nobel Prize book, and ask your lecturer to diversify the model as well, because otherwise we will be falling into the logical trap and end up being questioning whether oligarch is good or bad, which is not always the case. So myself is being trained in Murdoch, and I'm representing Murdoch School here. But I know that knowledge should be passed on, but I'm pretty sure that even though it's being passed on to another generation, I think new generation is as an intellectual labor, not as an oligarch Wijaya, I should at least reshape or sharpen the theory. And my mentor Kaniska Jayasuriya is also one of Murdoch boys. Keep calling me over the past few weeks, and he said, "Oh, Trisha, actually the oligarchy thesis by Fedi and Dick is um, lack of the theory of the state. That's your job to sharpen the state within the oligarchy. So what is the state and how we should connecting the state and the capital. So I think it's supposed to be my work today, and that's how I'm going to apply it to the case of infrastructure and nickel. And for the nickel itself, the article will be out soon. I think it probably will be out next week in Third World Quarterly. So please just listen to me. Don't take your phone to take picture of the slides, because you can read more details by downloading the paper, because it's also including the number of download. That's why I need to promote it here. Yeah, it's useful for my future career. Okay. All right. So next. Um, Okay, so my question here is that how do we explain the seemingly illiberal terms that just now we already mentioned early? Discussed this early morning, and how it relates to capitalist development. I think a student just now raised a very important questions about capital accumulation, and since we are short of time, we can't explain it further. But I think this time I will try my best to explain about this kind of capital accumulations and how it relates to the oligarchy. And the second, it's really important to raise the question, does the state remain neoliberal? Is the logic of the state internal to the logic of capital? So can we say that the state, Indonesian state nowadays speak on behalf of dominant capital in the country? I think that's the very important questions that we miss out, and we need to provide more clarity towards the questions. Next. All right. So before I explain further, I think it's really good for us to recall. I'm pretty sure that all of us here are already so tired hearing about Indonesia Goldfisher, Indonesia Emas, and everyone even making dark jokes about let's go accomplishing Indonesia Emas, blah blah blah. And even Jokowi said earlier that we need to have like significant mental revolutions, but at the end of the day, we are the one who are going to mental. We are going mental, not revolution. So anyway, this this Indonesia Emas 2045, at least it's providing some sort of scenario that allow the state to activate some populist agenda, or in my paper, I will coin it as technocratic populisms. Why is technocratic populisms? Because in Indonesia Emas, our government listed different policy visions, and among others, just like very neoliberal words, or neoliberal here, I mean, is very the World Bank or Asian development language, like human talents, the well-being, equality, or perhaps the downstream industrialization, digitalizations, all the favorite words that youngster love to hear. But the next one, okay. But what we have been seeing here about the state itself, the form of the state, is more like what I'm calling here authoritarian studiesisms, borrowing Polanza's concept, which features intensified state control over every sphere of socio-economic life, combined with decline of the institutions of political democracy. Of course, the quality is decreasing, but at the same time, it's actually allow the state, even though we are moving toward authoritarian modes, but it's being encapsulated within technocratic populisms. And these technocratic populisms is really give a leeway for process of capital accumulations through different policy combinations. So different policy combination here is not only about ethnic Chinese conglomerates in Indonesia that dominate the industrial structure in the country, for example, but we see different policy combinations like financializations, bond issuance, and also the state capitalism, and also the big brother from the north, which is China capitalisms, that come to this country and reconnected with this interior bourgeoisie that I might say, that including our BUMN as well, the state-owned enterprises, ethnic Chinese conglomerates, and new aspiring oligarchs like Haji Isam in Kalimantan. So this kind of things like the capital accumulation should be analyzed in totality, meaning that it's not only within the state in Indonesia, but also reconnected to international, that brings different forms of capitalisms and policy at the same time. Um, but but interestingly about populism, technocratic populism, is that the way the government promote neoliberal reforms, for example, through omnibus, deregulations for the smelter development, streamlining regulation, etc., is not based on the real spirit of neoliberalism, but it's based on the exigencies of moments. It's like viral, like everything needs to be just solved temporarily, um, in the face of crisis. So this is why it doesn't, all the policies being made, it's not because we are hijacked by oligarch, but because it doesn't necessarily solve long-term structural problems and inequalities, because it's just based on exigencies of moment. Next. Next again. Okay, so if we still can recall, I'm so sorry I cannot talk about the 100 days of Prabowo today, but I hope we still have more opportunity to discuss it probably next year, some event like this. But anyway, what I would like to recall here is more about the last 10 years of Jokowi presidencies. As we can see in the first 3 years of his presidency, a lot of like amazing people, even Archandra Tahar coming from the United States, and Ignatius Jonan, who reformed the KAI. Sri Mulyani, of course, the symbol of financial prudence in this country. It's like everyone are gathering, and as Marcus keep telling us in his research, he also said, "Oh, Jokowi keep distancing himself as part of oligarch." It's like Jokowi tried to insulate himself from oligarchy power. At least that what being said. But at least at the time there was an idea of making things correct. That also part of the mental revolution, right? And casting in the appeal of technical expertise to connect directly with the people, For example, how to make PPP, public-private partnership for infrastructure a success, or if we need to ban the nickel export, how we can make it, how we can refine it within the country, stimulate smelter development, added value, royalty, etc., etc. It's like more like running the state as an efficient entity. And indeed, if we look back in the early years of Jokowi presidency, we did see a lot of task force and even financial agencies directly being subordinated to the executive arm of the government. Next. So this is example like there is the so-called Komite Stabilitas Sistem Keuangan that is actually part of mobilizations of executive powers that is encapsulated through technocratic populism. So all these financial agencies are being are are responsible to the president, and they directly coordinate fiscal policy through this agency. And also, but one important thing is about the regulatory discretionary powers that being held within the executive authority, and also allow the state to inject the capital to several non-performing SOEs that in technocratic language is like de-risking for PPP project. And we also see a lot of movement that sees state-led financializations, how the Indonesian Infrastructure Guarantee Fund, for example, keep issuing bonds, even though at the time the Sarana multi-infrastructure was under financial pressures and is already indicates higher default risk. Why? It's because the next one that I would like to show you is about financialized class relations that is not being captured enough in oligarchy thesis. Next, show the, yeah. So what I mean by financialized class relation is that where a series of pragmatic decisions are not based on rigid ideological commitment to neoliberalisms, but is driven by the exigencies of moment that I mentioned just now, based on, for example, the COVID or the subsidy or any kind of crisis that just suddenly appear out of the blue, and then it lead to the subordinations of classes into a web of financial relations through varying mechanism, and including in the bond as well. This the inclusion of these financial products, for example, allow the government to inject capital to underperform SOEs that at least contribute to the enormous growth that we can see, which is 5%, very steady growth over the past few years, that actually contribute to the popularity of Jokowi himself, like the inflation control and economic growth. And as we can see in on the left, the right hand side, like the percent growth per sector, of course, the mining goes up and the construction as well. That's the easy money where the growth can be expedited, and the real, even though it's not real growth in GDP terms, but at least it can contribute in the macroeconomic levels. And at the time, even as you can see on the bottom side, like the conventional bonds is actually coming from our BPJS, for example. BPJS, Jamsos tax, the social safety nets of middle class and lower middle class that is being used to fund the populist agenda like the infrastructure development. So this is the context of financialized class relations. And this is just happened in one kind of policy, which is domestic bond issuance that really rely on the domestic products, financial products for middle class. Not yet for the international side, which is the next slide. Yeah, for example, this is the Indonesian Investment Authority that is going to be subordinated under Danantara, under Prabowo administrations. But Indonesian Investment Authority, of course, is very hard to trace the capital inflow to Indonesia Investment Authority. But one case in points that has been widely acclaimed by the government is actually from the Gulf states, like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, that all this fiscal surplus, the financial surplus from this country actually going into Indonesia. And then all this money actually controlled by the state agencies, and this money are injecting into our SOEs that are under financial distress, like Wijaya Karya, Wakista Karya, PPP Property, Adikarya, and so on and so forth. Next. And then this is also one of the example, like everyone here in this country talking about green transition, but it's really important to note that green transition itself, where's the money? The money is coming from oil money. So this is actually from Abu Dhabi, and this is why I say this is about the combined form of capitalisms. The solar panel probably comes from China, but the money is actually from the countries in the global north that enjoy the financial surplus. And this is where our state agency absorb it, reshape the class-based financializations, and at the end of the day, um, the money circulated within this country and benefited different dominant groups through different mechanisms. Through different mechanisms, what I mean, of course, perhaps you are asking about where's the ethnic Chinese oligarch, for example, where's Haji Isam? How do they benefit from this internationalization? So the answer is more about this. Next slide. The interior bourgeoisie. It's like probably they don't have enough mode of productions, but at least they are being located exactly in the interior of the state. They are still, even though they are transnationally oriented, we know Sinarmas probably have a lot of factory in China, Latin America, but they are still nationally grounded. Their market is still based in Indonesia, and the huge of point of accumulation with still within this country and rely on the state policy, including the technocratic policies or some like combined policy that was initiated by the state. And therefore, this this different fraction of capitalist class, even though they have different mode of productions, uh, different level of capital assets, but at least they share similar characteristic, which is they are interior to the state. The next one, next. So what I want to show you is more about downstreaming. If you are really want to see more on nickel, I see Jeremia sitting there. You can ask him more about the technical issue about Chinese nickel investment in Indonesia. But what I would like to make a connection here within the limited time is more about how the oligarch working within this industry. Uh, move, move. Okay, so this one. So that one, the Forbes 50 rich, and Pak Fedi is correct. Still, conglomerates who dominate this economy is still ethnically Chinese. So I'm a failed Chinese. Yeah. So but and then the one that I circle in blue, actually we can the Forbes identify their business as a diversified industry. But all of them, indeed, the bigger portion of their business portfolio are still in mining and still in the refining as well by collaborating with Chinese state capital. And and the way we see it is not necessarily meanings that they are the dominant capitalist class, of course, but there are also interior bourgeoisie that reconnecting the state technocratic policies the with the other capital from the global north as well as from China itself. And and this is why I said, for example, while they have their own base of capital accumulations, they have also interiorized Chinese capital and taken part of the Chinese link power block in a different way. Like Haji Isam, the aspiring oligarch, if I may say, also have his portion through that Citra Lampia Mandiri, which is the mining company, nickel mining company. But the other also have their bigger slice of pie, and they are part of this interior bourgeoisie, the class that has been raised to the political, playing important role as the political forces in the state as well. Okay, next reflection. Next. Yeah. So what I would like to stop here, but beforehand, what I would like to conclude is that crisis management under the tagline of Golden Indonesia 2045, I cannot say that it's bipartisan because in no way we are bipartisan. Even left and right wing is not clear in Indonesia. But what I can say is that we are moving towards depolarizations that allow reinforcement of distinct institutions of representations in Indonesia. And this is this formed an expression within different policy combinations, which is nickel-based growth strategy, for example, financializations, and even Hashim last week say he wants to pursue housing programs to thrive the cement industry in this country, and then carbon trading, etc., etc. And then we also don't know what kind of contradiction within capitalisms that happening in the global north, in the US and China, to what extent they will reshape the capitalist development in the country. And we never know what will be happening in Danantara, how's the class and social relations underpinning the new programs. But at the end of the day, I believe that these patterns of capital accumulations and class formations are shaped by and act to shape their forms of interactions with other parts of the global totality, but working through the structure of the state. So it should be examined in totality, but it also need to be analyzed meticulously within and through the state. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trisha. Oke, yang belakang masih oke ya? Pengaruh nasi bungkus, Indomie rebus, oke kan? Nggak masalah kan? Oke, oke. Wow, oke. Karena kita akan masuk ke discussion keempat, Dr. Diatika. Dr. Diatika will try to give us an interconnections between all these working conceptual category. In what sense is the oligarchy's dynasty, and also in what way dynasty use or take benefit from the clientelism. And the last part, Dr. Tika will also give us an provocation on political implication of this analysis in terms of what kind of social movement possible. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Tika, time is yours.
Thank you. I'm not a medical doctor. Doctor. It's the same in English, yeah. This is weird. Huh? Wait. Jalan-jalan aja ya. Okay. I have a back pain, so I need to walk around. Thank you. Thank you, Pak Robert, Prof. Robert, for for providing the introduction and the link between each presentation. I don't think I need to do much of it, but it's really nice to share the panel with the younger generation of scholar talking. Yeah. Hah? Tua ya? So tua. Younger generations of scholar discussing about this sort of issues. We hope. Oh, this is no. I'm a presenter, and I'm not supposed. I'm a discussant. I'm not supposed to deliver any message from the organizer. Okay, I'm gonna talk about some notes that I took during the whole seminar from the morning to the last presentation. Next, please. So what I'm gonna try to do next is to reflect on previous talks and ponder on the issues asked by several participants in the morning about whether there's a way out from the cage of oligarchy. So I'm gonna, can we continue? Sorry. So this is what I have in mind so far. Continuing from Dick and Betty, I understand oligarchy not as a person or a group of people, but it's a social formation where wealth becomes entwined with rulership in a coherent way. Again, linking to the title of this mini conference, the reorganization of power amidst the polycrisis of the 21st century. So I think the three presenters before talk about how crises are linked to the social reorganization of new and old social forces in a way that deepen unequal power relationships. Though each of the speakers uh, talk about the social reorganization in different ways. Farido, for instance, talk about continuity and change of clientelism in oligarchic democracy and how the Jokowi era actually, uh, it's not a spin-off, but what's the other word? It opens the door for the consolidation of oligarchic forces under Prabowo's. Farido also um, identify some limitation in using the oligarchy, some limitations that will be experienced by uh, the oligarchic under Prabowo's rules. And yes, talk about the consolidation of dynastic politics at the subnational level. I think one of the most important things from the presentation is to highlight the limits of the oligarchy framework that tend to see everything in the national level and perhaps often forgetting about what happened in the subnational level. And third presentation from Tricia, she talked about, I like the part when she talked about the utilization of other framework to sharpen the oligarchy framework. And she talked about the combination between technocratic governance and policy in a way that facilitates the political organization of interior bourgeoisie. It's really hard to pronounce. So I'm gonna move to a question. I actually got the question from Dick's uh, initial paper, which I developed into this presentation using examples from some of my own research conducted by myself and in collaboration with Inaya here, Fedi Hadis here, and Mbak Amalinda Safirani. So again, from the outside, it seems like there's actually potential populist movement that might demand for greater social welfare and legal protection. Do these movements actually offer a way to get out of the cage of oligarchy? That's the question. I don't think I need to explain the picture because I hope it resonates with every one of us here. Next slides. So here are some insights from my previous research as a background. I did research on precarious workers in the gig economy, so ojek online drivers, and the contradictions in their subjective experience, collective actions, and formation of solidarity. And I also expand the research on other section of precarious workers. So here are some of my thoughts. Multiple crises have indeed compounded grievances over intensified precarity and has from time to time sparked protest movements. The question is whether they have actually become social forces. And back to the first assumption, if we understand oligarchy as a social formation, whether the social forces can be transformed to social formation. So many social here. I hope I don't get confused and confuse everyone here. Our research have indicated some challenge in transforming the individual grievances into social forces and into social formation. The main problem, this is the one thing that we discussed on Friday during a seminar that reflect labor organization, the past and future, no, past and present, no future. Not that there's no future for that. It's the title of the seminar. Okay, so one problem that we identified is there has been a historical absence of political language. I give political language a quote because it's the sort of thing that we found in the seminar, so it's not yet fully developed. Political language that can help the working poor and the vulnerable middle class to see that their interest is against the oligarchs. That means challenging the structural issues that underpin their precarity. So what happened? What sort of language that resonates among larger sections of precarious workers? From research, we found that it's mostly about nationalism, Islamism, entrepreneurialism. So it's easier for workers, including myself actually, before my PhD, to understand my own marginalization and the way the world has disappointed us through this language of, oh, I don't work hard enough. I'm not religious enough. I'm not patriotic enough. That's easier. How about the language of human rights? That these workers are entitled of something from the state. How about the language of social democratism? I don't say that it's entirely absent, but it is rare to find the sort of language being used to articulate the grievances of the majority of precarious workers. Talking about language, and ideas. There are some material bases that actually condition the absence of alternative ideas to imagine our grievances and not to see ourselves as the most miserable among others. Next slide. To give you some example, based on my research, it's easier for the online object driver and the precarious worker to see themselves as partners and not workers. What does it mean? It means that they see themselves not as workers entitled to specific rights that they can demand from the state. And that's the entrepreneurialism ideology working. And it's easier to gather these people in pengajian than actually unionize them. Unionization is rare in the precarious economy. Not only because it is banned, these people are not protected by the law, but also because they don't see themselves as someone belong to the union. Next slides, please. How is this related then to their political actions? We expect those people who are angered by the work of the oligarchs to raise up and protest the situation. But again, related to the absence of common language, what we see is these workers um, supporting the omnibus law, the one that Tricia discussed. We also witness these workers, not everyone, but some precarious workers become part of the, what's that? The violent group, no? Violent group, vigilante, attracted by ethnicity and ethnic based and religion based identities. Of course, there's a couple of these workers who demand for the rights for unionization. Again, rights for me is something that represents a language that resonates with grievances. There's also this group of workers that demand for their rights, but I would say that they are the minority among the majority of the workers. Okay, hope you can bear with me for another 5 to 10 minutes, 7 minutes. Next slide. Um, um, I quoted from Fedi and Dick's article that there are rooms for individuals and organization to resist the structural imperatives. But as mentioned by the anonymous German that Fedi's mentioned in his talk, the room is shaped by the circumstances that they inherit. Under the circumstances, is there a way out? That's the question, right? I quote another scholar who talked about a subaltern politics. I'm not gonna add subaltern framework in this discussion, but I see the that I think the argument makes sense, that there are ways to negotiate the social structure to make one's life more bearable. That ways, the negotiation can meaningfully negotiate and rework power structure from below. I believe in that. That's why we are here today, I think. But such attempts can also reiterate the logic of the structure. So if we are, I'm gonna quote again from Mbak Linda. She mentioned about jalan tikus. How to translate jalan tikus in English? Red road. Red road. If everything, if the oligarchs is everywhere, what can we do? How about taking advantage from the red road, jalan tikus? It's by doing that, are we resisting the structure? Probably not. Are we negotiating the structure? Probably yes. But the question remains, can we rework the power structure? Yes. But there's a possibility for us to strengthen the power structure. And I would like to again point out to Tricia's argument about the exigencies of moments. If those in power can make use of the moment of crisis, which is not permanent, everything is temporal, is there a way for those in the grassroots to make use of the moment and to I don't know. I lose. Yeah. Please go on, continue. Thank you. Last one. So this is an example of how these precarious workers need to always deal with the power structure. one way for them to get their demand being granted is by building an alliance with politicians. Guess what? In the previous election, the three candidates and the workers um, showed their support for these three candidates. Is it a good sign? Well, there's probably that it's probably a good sign, because meaning that the grievances are being captured by those in power. But again, considering the uniformity of platforms among these three candidates, what can we hope from the potentiality of the social forces to actually manifest into social formation? Lastly, there's always this precarious workers demanding for their rights, uh, precarious, what are they doing? Oh, precarious workers demanding for a more comprehensive social welfare program. Is this a social force? I don't know. If they can make use of the moments, they can be a social force. But if they're being captured by those in the intra-elite oligarchic competition, most probably at the subnational level, as mentioned by Yos, they will probably again be part of those that reiterate the oligarchic structure. I will end my talk here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jatika. We have 15 minutes for discussions. So to maximize our red apa tadi? Red roads. Red roads. Yeah. Uh, I think we have floor now. Is there any question or comments or yeah, one here and two. Yeah, okay.
All, my name is Andina from Monash University. My question might not be directly related to all this technical concept, but I want to take this opportunity to have us imagine something. Where is the hope in all of this? Because no matter how sophisticated and tangy all the theories, we are the one that has to live with these consequences, right? Sekarang ini Kompas just said an article about kabur aja dulu, which all the young people of Indonesia want to escape this country, and I think you and I share the same, what do you call it, destiny. We are this young, educated people in Indonesia, and what are we supposed to do with all of this knowledge and all of these theories kalau masih percaya dengan tugas sejarah kaum terdidik gitu katanya ya. And Diatika said that there's a way out of oligarchy, but maybe what if you don't have to, you know, break through or maybe challenge them and maybe work with them? I don't know. What kind of imagination do you guys have to, you know, just uh, live with the consequences and try to generally make situations better, not only for us but for the nation? Thank you.
Thank you. All you guys would like to like a response first or all question? Okay, we collect all Chris question.
I have two questions. My first question to Dr. Farido. It's about the three limitations that you mentioned. One is how Prabowo actually cut the Bansos spending, like 50%, and how he choose like the oligarchs in his side. Um, my question is, why do he choose these limitations? For me, it can be avoided, and I think it just makes him unpopular because if I can reiterate Marcus' claim about Prabowo vision is about to be a popular leader. But these limitations that you mentioned, I think is just quite paradoxical to this vision to be a popular leader. So that's my question to Dr. Farido. And my second question to Dr. Kanawas. There's a part of your presentation talking about should we have this diverse or a division of good dynasty or benign dynasty and malicious dynasty. So I just want to maybe ask about in which part actually you're concerned about dynastic political dynasty. Is it in the process of gaining the power that's not level to everyone, or is it the outcome of this politician? So for example, let's say if one of these ratu atut politician actually become a good politician, should we say it as a good political dynasty even though the process of gaining the power is not ethical? Thank you.
Check. My name is Alfredo. I'm from University of Queensland. My question is directed to both Tricia and Tika. It's one thing to use populism perhaps as a strategic political political strategy, but another to use it as a academic analytical category, analytical concept. And one of the criticisms levied against populism as a concept is that it tends to obfuscate the actual political content and material implications of such policies, of which subsume under the discursive narrative of populism. And since you both operationalizes populism in your own research, do you still found there's great merits in using populism for political analysis, and found that the criticisms of populism as obfuscating as unfounded? Or do you think that there is still that there is some merits to the criticism of populism from other scholars? And not to mention that the utilization of populism as a euphemism, as a false equivalency between left-wing populism and right-wing populism, and its utilization as a pejorative, stigmatizing language against appeals to the masses policies. Thank you.
So I would like to address the question on budget cut first as one of the limitations of clientelist politics. I think when it comes to budget cuts, it's a policy choice that Prabowo makes because he has other priority, and that priority is the free food or free lunch program, right? And cutting all those budget components, uh, including the ones related to bansos and hibah, uh, doesn't make him unpopular. I think he can still become popular through this populist um, makan bergizi gratis program, right? So it's a matter of policy choice, and it doesn't make him less popular. Having this program might be beneficial for electoral strategy, but not in a clientelist way. So because usually the opposite of clientelist strategy or clientelist distribution is a programmatic distribution, right? Where people gets to enjoy the benefit and people can be excluded as the beneficiary of that program. And I think when it comes to MBG, uh, it is more of a universalist programmatic policy rather than bansos. When it comes to bansos and hibah, you can exclude people as as the beneficiary because it is discretionary. But when it comes to makan bergizi gratis, every school children has to have it, right? So that's one limitation in terms of the clientelist strategy. I like the question on hope because we are in UE, right? And we used to be the mobilizational force of change, right? I used to be a student activist myself. What happened to me? Uh, no, but I love that question. I think it's a question that we all need to ponder, especially the youth here. What hope do we have? I would like to um, answer this question in two layers. So first, I think uh, to be a bit pessimistic, uh, I'll be a pessimistic and then become optimistic. Okay, uh, hope. My hope uh, died when uh, we we thought Jokowi was a new hope. My hope died when I thought Jokowi was a new hope, or we all thought Jokowi was a new hope, right? And then, having read all the scholarly works, on oligarchy uh, by Jeffrey Winters, by Prof. Hadis, and Prof. Richard Robinson, I became a bit more pessimistic and thought that the only way out was through revolution because it's structural in a sense, right? We can get out of this. But having heard about uh, Mbak Amalinda Safirani's Jalan Tikus earlier this morning, I began to think that could perhaps there be a Jalan Tikus for us to get out of this? And interestingly, I learned um, while doing my fellowship at Yale, I took some courses at the Yale Business School, right? And then they thought about social entrepreneurship and philanthropy and how that could be a force for good. And then working for Katadata, I work for foundations, well owned by oligarchs and so on. But we are doing research project. We are doing, projects to help upscale small and medium enterprises and help uplift poverty and so on. If we could find a way to perhaps make these oligarchs donate more money and distribute their resources uh, in a way, right? Uh, we could perhaps channel it to something that could be a force for good. So this goes back to Joa's statement on, you know, finding or um, finding more benign oligarchs or encouraging oligarchs to be more benign. Uh, this is where I will pass it on to you, Yoas.
Okay, so first, I'm not as optimistic as uh, Rido. In i- since I quite believe in both approaches of oligarchies. Uh, First, if we follow Dick and Fedi's oligarchy school of thought, then it's a structure, very structured, right? I mean, it's a social part of the order, and it's quietly tied with capitalism. In that case, as long as capitalism exists, oligarchy will exist. Same like if we believe in Jeffrey Winter's argument of oligarchy. What, but according to Jeff, I think there's cases where types of oligarchies will change, could change from, for example, from warring oligarchy to civil oligarchy. I think that's the best hope, but I do really scared of saying hope right now because again, uh, it's quite. Uh, I don't think. I think we need to deal with more with jalan tikus as mentioned earlier, finding the best, making out the best out of this situation. Uh, Probably I'm because the institution of or the institution of oligarchy is quite locked in right now. I mean, if you want to change some system, for example, you need the political parties, but political parties are quite um, comfortable with the current situations. Need to wait for another rupture, and imagining that rupture could be quite scary. We can also do like gradual institutional change, but it's the outcome of it is also unpredictable because it will depends on how who hold the power. So yeah, and about the tugas sejarah of kaum terdidik, I think we need to be more humble right now, learn from people rather than teaching them on what to do. I think we get dialectical conversation with makin sore makin sendu.
Jangan khawatir teman-teman. Okay, Tricia, the last question from our friends behind, please.
Test. Yeah. Uh, I will just shortly address about the hopes. I already lost my hope from long time ago.
Long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. But for me, it's just a reality, right?
Yeah.
We should just embrace. This is what happening when you have capital, class, and the state, and just enjoy the beauty of power relations. Even though, like, I was yeah, I keep asking my dad what the heck our grandparents is doing during New Order. We could have accumulated rich, like yeah. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's really misleading. I don't know, perhaps I have rich aura or anything. Like, when I stroll around Australia, people often ask, "Are you crazy rich Indonesian?" like that. But I'm just the crazy, not the rich one, like that. Yeah. But anyway, I'm already I spent quite a while in Japan, and so sorry, Kawamura-san, but I feel like Japanese politics is quite boring, right? And that's why you are enjoying Indonesian politics, like studying Indonesian politics. And also this is linked to the questions about right wing, left wing populist narrative. I still remember when Bidenomics take shapes, and then suddenly China plus one policy, friendshoring in Japan, like everyone talking about, like in the level of policies, like everyone is talking about how to inviting Taiwanese, South Korean chip makers, semiconductor, and how to make sure that this policy can have a spillovers and domino effects in the some less developed prefecture state in Japan. That's kind of like that's the policy that they think of. But in Indonesia, our policymakers are not thinking of the like that. It's more like based on the surface, like the preference, what the lower middle class like, cheaper energy, subsidies, and free lunch, cheap or subsidized education. Or last time there was another filer like ITB, uang masuk mahal, something like that. Like people here no way like the Apple and Nvidia forget that things. Like people here love free things, free riders. Like and this is what fit into our populist narratives. And this become also like a stimulators towards a new technocratic populism in Indonesia that actually incorporate indirectly different fractions of capital. So what I say here is that just enjoy the ride and just see how this capitalist class struggles and then compete between them. We cannot change things, and pardon if I'm a bit a skeptical one, but I mean that's what we call power relations. Yeah.
Okay. um. Okay. I'm not a hopeful person, but um, capitalism is inherent with its own contradictions. So there are always opportunities within the contradictions of capitalism, meaning that if we are careful in unpacking the power structure and we understand it well, we might see opportunities that we can seize. That's an abstract answer, but that's how I see it. And as a crisis, it's fleeting. It's not permanent. So if our task is to analyze the moment of crisis and the responses to it and see what sort of opportunities that can arise from the moment of crisis. It's a contradiction in utilizing the jalan tikus. Kalau jalan tikus nanti ada permainan cepet juga. Okay. And the merit of using the concept of populism, it's been useful for me to link the contradiction within subjective experiences with the objective structure. So it's useful to help to explain how people are angry about the structural inequality, but understand it not as a structural problem, but see it as an individual problem and blame themselves and their friends, the fellow, the the other people who actually experience grief, although in a very different way. So that's the value of using the populism concept to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all the panelists. I have 5 minutes to make a closing, but I think my time is only 3 minutes left, yeah, but it's okay. When I read Dick Robinson's The Rise of Capital in 1991, I read it in as a subversion political act. Dick Robinson wrote it maybe as an academic analysis, but in Indonesia, read in a political subversion manner in 1991. So there's a different implications in terms of the epistemological act when we're dealing with the text. But fortunately, in every, especially in economic, political economic theory, especially critical one, I think we cannot avoid that. There's always a, how to say it, a emancipatory implication behind it. Even although the writers try to avoid or try to masking it with the academic vision, but it is unavoidable that in every political economic theory there will always be a political implication behind that. And sometimes, and our vision, etc. There's we live in the depression level. It is because we go in inherent manner in that sense. So jadi ini selalu persoalan kalau kita bicara teori oligarki atau apa dalam membahas Indonesia. Persoalannya adalah at the last instance kita terbawa pada persoalan what we going to do, the ethical implication of the theory. Dan soal ini I think saya teringat tahun 98, 97 dulu deh, Desember di UI sini, banyak dosen-dosen UI, salah satunya misalnya saya ketemu dengan E.F. Saifullah Fatah, tahun 98 mendekati 98, E.F. Saifullah Fatah tak percaya bahwa Soeharto bisa jatuh. Tapi nggak sampai setengah tahun. Bulan Mei Soeharto jatuh. Agustus 2024. Orang mengira bahwa udah pastilah pilkada itu akan berlangsung kota kosong. Ini elit yang berkuasa pasti akan menang. Nggak ada orang mengira that in 22nd of August there is a big student protest in front of the parliament. They changed the political constellation, not a radical change, but a change is always possible. Jadi kita berteori, kita membahas teori dengan serius, dengan gawat, dengan intens, tapi when it comes up with social movement, just do it. Kalau menurut saya sih begitu, daripada depressing. Dengan itu saya ucapkan selamat sore. Kita berjumpa di sesi berikutnya lagi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our chair, our discussant, and all of our panelists. That should be the end of session 3, panel discussion. And before we close the event for public participants, I would like to invite Dr. Inaya Rahmani once again for her closing remarks. Mbak Inaya.
Nggak usah di sini aja. So please stay here because in solidarity. Thank you everyone for staying until the afternoon. Thank you for all the speakers. I'd like to close by picking up what Robert said about intellectual thought becoming a potential political force. Because this morning when I was talking to Sheila is a coordinator at the Asia Research Center. I said to Sheila, no, it was yesterday. Dick's book was photocopied and spread across 90s activists as part of political organization. So in my mind, intellectual thought never occurs not shaped in a social and political vacuum. And it's the task of intellectuals to bring that into moments of crisis during which there is a political absence. So what Fadi this morning mentioned as political absence, in which nobody was trying to take reign during that period, was also a failure of intellectuals in Indonesia and their allies in the Asia Pacific. That's one. The second is sadness is an emotion. All emotions have potentials for political force. The point is, where do we want to channel that? Through our writing, through our sophisticated knowledge and intellectual skills, or the articulations of our intellectual thoughts, or giving tools for a broader social basis for working class politics. In a time of multiple crises of neoliberalisms, in which Tika explained, through working class solidarity and movements that benefit oligarchic interests more than any of our interests here in the room, and the people who we interview every other year as subjects of our analysis for our academic promotion. So there's always contradictions in our labor process. There's always individual fixations, because it's much easier to blame people with faces than to paint a picture in which there is structural unequal power, in which we see capital accumulation. Tricia articulately explained about the differences of schools of thoughts. What I want to bring forth here is that knowledge is not in a social vacuum. It's intimately connected to power and the accumulation of power. And if we look at UI, ITB, IPB, UGM, these universities were nationalized after Indonesia's independence. And since then, the kinds of knowledge, and Robert, you mentioned epistemic approaches, epistemology, the kinds of intellectual thoughts that's being produced
in these universities we work in are used to legitimize policies, whether it's technocratic, for state enterprises during this moment. In the 80s, it was used to justify, as Fedi has written in Social Science and Power with Daniel Dakide, policies that justify economic growth and state developmentalism. So what we hope, because Andina was talking about hope, hope is a sense of direction and it guides our labor process and modes of production. And we are in the new modes of knowledge production. So if you want to talk about hope, it's a sense of direction within these multiple crises in which we need to seize opportunities, as Tika has quoted Dick, seize opportunities during these crises because it means that there is a vacuum of power, there's a power struggle, there's a competition without overestimating our own capacities. Because if we do, we become subsumed into intra-oligarchic competition, as is the case with SKSG and UI, as in the case with honoris causa doctorates, and we become even more fragmented, and actors within these fragmentations are the aspirational oligarchs that you talk about on a subnational level, local level, village level, that goes into climbing the ladders of the different localities in which Trisha talks about is part of Hilirisasi. And Hilirisasi has entered all of our campuses up to a local level. So what I want to do is a call for forming a social basis so that we are not too much focused in our individual fixations, and we talk about our different schools of thoughts in a constructive way. And Faris will organize the next session, talking about how to network across scholars and ways to mobilize our social basis, intellectual social basis. And if we don't have any patrons, because we don't have any patrons, the patrons are fighting, we no longer have stable state funding for good and bad reasons, because good meaning that the elite doesn't care about us on campus. The bad thing is that there's increased casualization, and it's really difficult to promise employment for early careers. But by talking about it and mobilizing multiple resources and working collectively, we should be able to build those steps more constructively and not be subsumed into A, our own feelings, or B, into the intra-elite competition. So with that in mind, I'd like to give the floor to Faris. Thank you so much for all the speakers today. It was such a great pleasure. Thank you to Sheila and Riri, and also Trisha and Tika for co-convening. Faris, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Inaya. And before we're talking about this session, I was asked to chair the brainstorming on, this is less theoretical, less empirical, this is more technical. But before that, I would like to address just a little bit about hope and not hope that the last panel was talking about. I want to tell a story when we were studying in Murdoch. Apologies to Vedi if I tell this is stories about election. So if anyone here asks whether Professor Vedi Hadis will giving his vote for election, will know the answer that he will not give his vote because of the broad pictures of oligarchy. But you know what? In 2014, I'm not sure whether this is hope or no. We, the friends in Murdoch, we gathered together with Mas Airlangga and everyone else during the election 2014, and everyone was talking, let's ask Pak Fedi to vote. And everyone persuaded him. He said, no, of course not. And with kind of diplomacy, and we just kind of hopeless. And that day, he show up in the consulate general giving his word. Uh, I'm not sure for whom. Bernie Sanders. All right. So this is related to what Inaya said. All right. We should not underestimate ourselves on doing something based on our own background. So this session allow me to just bring this session for 5 minutes, and then I would like to open for forum. First, I would like to start by thanking the Asia Research Center UI for hosting this event, because I attend many conferences where broad conferences where attendance not really engaging very specific topic and for the very long time. And this forum is amazing because the topic is bold, strong, and everyone listening because of the topic is important. And the second, of course, we celebrate the 20 years of Dick and Pak Vedi's book. This is truly, as Marcus said before, a testament of its strong influence. But more than that, this book also shows in a time of the growing discussion of Indonesian political economy in Indonesia, not just the topic after that discussed broadly in many spectrums of academics, but also we saw the growing of Indonesian academics, not only in the national level, but in international level. We are now quite familiar with Indonesian academics publishing, discussing on Indonesian politics and economy in a global forum and being respected by international audience and international academics. And this should be legacies that need to be continued. Had in a small background, mostly Indonesian academics, because of the bureaucracy, universities are mostly being asked to really discipline within its own discipline. What I mean by that is that if you're from political science, you are asked to be part of Association of Political Sciences. If you are governmental or administrative sciences, you are asked to be very specific on that. Or if you are international relations, you also asked to be part of Association of International Relations. We are not having time to discuss crossing. What we need is that a networking forum for cross, but within a certain perspective. And the second background is that because of Indonesian academics also really bureaucratic, uh, most of the conferences or forums being attract if the forum promise something like sort of publications, Scopus Index, something like that. Everyone knows here familiar. This could be bring more substantial into bringing a like this forum to be more specific on the perspective of political economy. That's why linking what we have experienced from many academics, for example, when Inaya and everyone else studied in Australia, we have to be honest that we have a close relationship with Australia because the Indonesian discourse topic subject many developed in Australia. So we might able to uh, follow the traditions. One of the good tradition over there is that they have their own Australian International Political Economy Network uh, to have a forum regularly every year to discuss our own topic of research, but not just because of the benefits of research itself, but according to Inaya previously, but this is also as part of our rule as academics to say something, to contribute something to our political economic dynamics in Indonesia. We should taking part of saying something, and by doing that, it is very important to have this community in order to see that the discussion of Indonesia based on the perspective of political economy is variety and diverse. And it is good for our students to have those diverse kind of topics to be discussed. And it is also good for our own contributions as academics because we kind of have solidarity. We would like to have, we would have a network on how to address issues in Indonesia. Even though some questions addressed, we might not able to change much, but we should not underestimate ourselves to contribute within our own field. That's why in this session, I'll end this introduction by proposing the network of political economy in Indonesia and linking to Australia, whether our students, our colleagues, our lecturers who also doing research on Indonesia, bringing together the research, the perspective, the insight on Indonesian politics and societies based on based on political economy approach. I'm proposing this kind of network. The name will be coming later, but that's the idea of this brainstorming. So we will have a regular forum every year or every 2 years discussing about Indonesian politics and society based on political economy perspective. Okay. Now, allow me to open the forum. I'll give to first comment to Tika. Want to say something about these ideas because we have discussed with Inaya, Tika, and Tricia about this kind of forum, and we'll continue for next year and year after that, engaging broad communities of political economy. You want to say something, Tika? Just say something.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Faris. I started to get really sleepy because it's almost 4. Might just jump into the more practical, like a more practical ways of doing it. I think the most possible thing to do is to have another event next year. Probably not hosted by the ARCUE only, but co-hosted with Universitas Muhammadiyah Maluku, perhaps in Maluku. The only reason I say this because it's a heavy load to carry if we do it ourselves, but if it's only the ARC, we are nothing compared to what is happening right now. So yeah, what I have in mind, probably Inaya or Tricia will add something to this. Probably have another event being organized in Maluku, I don't know.
Or in Jogja could
Or in Jogja with people if there's any interest to come in. Of course, we can always help co-hosting, or perhaps in Melbourne where Tricia will be based. Well, just just a random thought. But Jogja, another event in Jogja sounds plausible. Another mini conference. Some people ask why is it a mini conference? Well, yeah. Okay, you want to say? No. Okay.
All right, thank you, Tika. So that's one idea that we would like to have a next year forum in order to keep the networks alive, and it is very good for our students and good for political economy network because we believe that this perspective, how to see things, how to see politics and society in Indonesia should be engaging with more political economy because we saw the phenomena within our own eyes. So we should address those issues together within the network. Okay. So if anyone has an opinion or ideas, welcome to say something about it. So later on, me and Inaya, Tika, Tricia, and possibly some others will discuss the technical issues for the next year event. Maybe in Jogja, I think more possible on that because of the location at this stage. Yeah. You want to say something, Charan? Okay. Yeah. Charan wants to chair in Binus. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Dick Robinson suggested that we should have like concrete plan for next year in order to keep the network because I once attended the Australian International Political Economy Network and it was good. It was small like this, focusing on political economy, and they shared their topics, different topics, but based on the political economy. And it is good also to bring different perspectives within political economy, so we will learn each other and we can broaden the insight on how to address the issues in Indonesian politics and societies. Okay, but Malinda, Dick, you want to say something?
Yeah, if I could just, can everyone hear me? Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that a function of a political economy group would be to forum for people to come together with other people who are working on the same lines. But one of the things to do would be to bring along work that's in progress and talk to other people about it and get their reactions to it, rather than presenting, you know, your finished papers like an ordinary conference. It's sort of a workshop every couple of years where you can throw ideas around and get ideas, get feedback. Maybe after the conference, people write to you and tell you what they thought. So it's just a means of bringing people together, but it's got to be constructive, because you get sick of going to conferences where you sit and you listen and you go away and that's the end of it. So one of the things you could think about would be it could be take the form of people presenting stuff they're working on, ideas that they've got, and getting feedback from it. So it's a living thing, you know. It's not a dead conference. It's a living workshop. But if you're going to, you know, throw these ideas around, and people can come back with their own proposition.
Well, thank you very much. We put underline of that. It's a living process. So what Dick suggested is that the forum is like a workshop where people presenting their ongoing research or writing. So when they present it to audience, there were feedbacks and discussion. And I think that's also what is very important, because should refer to that in Indonesia, people want to going to conference and they already make sure that their paper will be published in the what we call volume of conference. Yeah, you want to say something, Inaya? Yeah.
I like that idea of having early careers. We have that as a pilot at ARC-UI. We host PhD students doing field work, and after they're done, they present with discussants. So Tika organized that, designed and organized that. But if we have multiple PhD students or postdoc students, and notably under increasingly neoliberalizing universities across the Asia Pacific, so not only in Indonesia, but in Australia, it's really difficult to get a secure job, fixed employment. And we got into the field because it was meaningful for us. And that sweet spot during the last year of our PhD, whether or not we're going to write a monograph, and 2 years after graduating, whether we want to stay in the academia or not, and if not, what's our exit strategy, I think it would be helpful if during those questions they had a peer and also supportive mentors, supportive people who are in more senior positions who have been disappointed, have been broken, also could give feedback and remember why they got into the field in the first place, because after a while it becomes banal for us as we become more and more established. So I would like to pick up on Dick's idea and have a special focus on early careers, mid-careers, and give feedback in a friendly setting. And we in ARC, we would be happy to share resources, but preferably in another place so that it's the responsibility is shared rather than concentrated in a few people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inaya. That's also an idea. I think it's very important. So peer, and mentoring. I think that's also very good because we're not, we are not able to develop as a academics without mentorship, without a friendship, without peer reviewing. I think that's a very, very important to put on the line. Thank you. Prof. Eddie, you wanna say something?
First of all, I nominate Sharan to chair the network. And secondly, I would highly recommend that the next one is a maxi conference rather than a mini conference. And thirdly, I think that while we want it to be a forum whereby, sort of early career researchers and other researchers are able to talk about their work with each other and provide input and so on, I think we also need to pay attention not to be insular, in that I think we should be inviting, Australian or other foreign PhD students who are working on Indonesian political economy issues to be involved in the network, or at least, in the workshops. So just to avoid the insularity, and also to make sure that, that our students, are connected with students from overseas and vice versa. Who will second my nomination for Sharon?
Thank you very much, Pak Fedi. This is also a very important idea because so many students in Australia currently are also doing PhD on Indonesian politics and economy. Some PhD candidates in this room. All right. Okay. I think yes. You want to say something, please? We still have 5 minutes before. You want to say something? Who? You want to say something? You can introduce yourself. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You want to say something?
Maybe.
Yes. All right. Maybe it's yes. Okay.
Well, I'm not really sure what I need to say, but I'm a PhD candidate from University of Melbourne. Prof. Eddie, hello.
Who's the supervisor?
I'm supervised by Kate McDonald, if you're familiar with, and Evgeny Posnikov. Well, and I met Tricia in Melbourne when she's looking for accommodation in Melbourne. um, as a PhD candidate and maybe soon to be an early career researcher, I talk about this with my fellows. We actually really, I think Mbak Inaya or someone picked up about the precarity of being a academia, like how harsh it is, the competitions, being an academia in Australia and also in Indonesia. And as a PhD candidate who is not yet established, me, myself, and some of my friends, we really, doesn't have a confidence to be in a forum to talk about our argument. Kate, my supervisor, always remind me, Widdy, when you write, why are you offer site? Also, when I talk, I tend to be oversight. No, based on Fedi, based on Tricia, da 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 da. And I always try to back up my argument with too many citations. Which means, as a PhD candidate, I'm not confident enough to be in a forum, to be in a conference, maybe myself. And this is because I feel like I don't have, apart from my supervisory, don't have a mentor. So what I also talk with Tricia, it's always good to have a mentor who is closely work with us. And I told Tricia, is it possible to have a workshop organized by the seniors working in political economy. Let's say on a political economy of blah blah blah, and then divided us, group us into topics. And then as an early career PhD, I got one or two mentors to, give a feedback, review, like nurture us for maybe one article. And I feel like if it's possible, it's really boosts our confidence, because supervisors, they're really helpful, but not all the supervisors, I think, working exactly, in a similar area. I mean, Kate McDonald, I'm not talking bad about her, but like working closely with someone who's really looking at Indonesian political economy will be great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I shared your feeling, by the way, because when I was attending Australian International Political Economy, Kanishka told me, go Faris, you have to attend. And I was very nervous because professors, we are just a few students, PhD students, but it was great because we have to overcome our, nervous, and we have to present it our works. I think that's a very important note. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe after the conference, either mini or maxi, we can have not necessarily a proper publication for all, but
Yes, yes.
only like a volume.
Yeah.
Most preferably with language that accessible and familiar to the public, so that we're not only few people talk every year among us each other and not really having something to say for the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that's also very important. So when we come to the forum, so we can hear different, diverse things. Okay. I think we have all right. Okay. We still have 5 minutes. Is that all right? Okay. Yeah. 5 minutes. Prof. Amalinda. Yeah. Pak Linda.
Okay, I really like the idea of having not just a conference and by everyone and let's talk in WhatsApp. So this is very, very nice to have a nice of follow up. But I think we also need to be careful when we shape this idea, particularly on, I want to address what others already mentioned about the load of a lecturer academics is really impossible. So thinking about that, realizing that point, we also need to create such kind of incentive for those who will involve in this kind of initiative, but both by the early career researcher or those who are doing the mentorship.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everybody will get burned out, which is not something we are going to do. Other thing is that recently these issues on ASN lecturer protesting inefficient efficiency of the budget and all kind of things that also influence the well-being of the lecturer themselves, right? So I just want to mention that I think the solidarity and the share burden is really important as a platform of this whatever we're going to do.
Yeah.
With a clear and targeted and not too depressing or project oriented type of output based, OBE whatever we have in our campus ya.
That's
Apa
right.
OBE itu tingkatannya?
Outcome based education.
That ada
You're
something.
the head of a department.
I mean, otherwise we will going to have this another cycle of self-destruction, self-destruction project. That's not really good for all of us. So I guess I just want to address that there are material base. We need to think about this material dimension of, right? Not that, I'm not really against everything, but a lot of all kind of initiative is really good, as what we discussed before, creating this opportunity and hope, right? That I will find that as a long-term project and living activities that we don't know what will happen next year and next 2 years and but it needs to be on, right? So but just to make sure that once we are thinking about this idea, we also consider the idea, the aspect of materiality of the lecturer, the academics, that what's all of the burden that we have is really extremely heavy. But of course, we'd love to, co-author with early career researcher, even though it's a bit discrimination, but like me, like late career researcher, not in the picture, but it's fine. So we can go, collaborate. So the collaboration, so in solidarity, that's really important keyword that we need to, as a principle of what we're going to do. I guess that's just my note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mbak Lina. So the underline is that the sustainability of the network or the forum. Jefferson, you wanna say something? Because you raise your hand. Yeah. The microphone, please. Yes.
I just wanted to, anyway, I think this is a great initiative, great conference. I just wanted to suggest that maybe it's worth looking at how political institutions, like might be worth looking at how political institutions are evolving in Indonesia for the next iteration of the event. I think that that's very much related to the themes of this conference on power and like where Indonesia is going over the next uh, the many years to come. Because I think if you look at how Sammy Huntington said that, I mean, it is not so much the type of government, but the degree of government that shapes and determines political societies. And I think if you look at uh, the political institutions in Indonesia, it's not just about the democratization process, but that a lot of the institutions in Indonesia, for instance, the parliament and some of the others that I can think of, the presidency, which I'm studying, are not as ideally effective as they can be, and that affects the ability of Indonesia to move forward as a polity and as a country. So I was thinking that just throwing this out, that could be a potential idea for a future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Lastly, would like to have Marcus say something just in brief about the idea, because many students will be supervised by Marcus in NU, so we would like also his students to come to our firm.
First of all, I would like to second the nomination that Vedi Hadis submitted.
Word. That's a great idea.
Yes, yes. Because normally what happens to me in these kinds of contexts is that one of us ends up with the mentoring role and so forth. No, I do think it's a great idea. I do think it will be a challenge to come up with suitable topic frameworks that then allow for publications, for instance, so that it's not just an assembly of topics all related somehow to political economy, but that each of these conferences actually runs through a coherent theme, right? And then you build on that. The other point, of course, which I would support is that it should not just be focusing on the whatever you want to call it, the Murdoch School or the Melbourne School,
yes,
or whatever, but that it's a broader net that's sort of thrown out to get everybody in. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important closing statement, that this is a broad community of political economies, not just Murdoch, but broad perspectives within political economy. Well, thank you very much. I think that's the end of our session. Once again, thank you, Inaya, Tika, and Tricia, and everyone in ARC.
Thank you, everyone. Another round of applause for our chair, Prof. Haris. And that is the end of the mini conference. For those of you who are willing to stay until 4 p.m. in the afternoon, we thank you very much. And we hope the discussion was insightful and delightful, not only insightful, but also delightful. And we wish to see you in other events organized by ARC. And for the speakers that are still here, perhaps we could take one last photo together before we end the conference. So that is Prof. Dick, if you don't mind, and Prof. Eddie. Just one last photo and then we're done for the day. Sorry for keeping you guys for longer than it should be. And yes, for all of the participants, thank you so much for participating until the end. Come on. Enggak sih sebenarnya. Intinya cuman ini juga nggak apa-apa. But I don't know. Ya, udah pada capek ya? Ya udah, that's okay. Um, aku minta langsung satu-satu aja. Ada yang udah, ada yang belum. Karena nggak mungkin aku takut. Okay. Change of plans. No need for photo time. So feel free to have the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.